Happy Friday, everybody. Coming up tonight on News Center Now, we tried navigating the streets of Maine's largest city through the eyes of somebody living with a disability. We'll tell you about what he's trying to do to change it.
Plus, have you heard stories about some bad things happening at Westbrook's library? Well, we looked into it and turns out those stories may not be completely true.
And the first major snowfall of the year is on its way. We've got some friendly reminders for how you can stay safe.
This is News Center Now. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning into News Center Now. I'm Amanda Hill.
And I'm Chris Costa in for Lee Goldberg. We're through the first full week of December, and it sounds like it's finally on its way. The S word. Is snowfall finally coming? Keith Carson's here to let us know. Hey, Keith.
It is, guys. It is down across the south right now into parts of the Carolinas. Some pretty good snow west of Raleigh here into northwestern parts of Georgia. This is the same system that will move towards us. It's not overly impressive in its development or its dynamics, but it is quite a bit of moisture stretching back to the south and west, and it will slowly move in here by early afternoon tomorrow. You can see the clouds already moving in, but none of the precip until tomorrow afternoon. So here we are tonight. We start getting cloudy. Temperatures kind of flatline in the mid-20s in most spots. Snow doesn't break out again until, say, 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So the first couple hours are fine tomorrow. May start briefly as a little bit of a rain mix. Then the snow shield pushes on shore 2 to 4 o'clock over down East Maine, a little bit earlier over the mid-coast. It's snowing at a decent clip here between, say, 5 and 8 p.m. All along the coastline, and then focusing itself over the mid-coast and down East Maine later on in the evening. It is important to note here, since this isn't a huge and dynamic storm, it's not going to be ripping snow at any given time. I think most of it will be light and at times moderate, and it will be a little bit stickier with temperatures right around that freezing mark. Snows overnight on Saturday and in through early on Sunday. Then an upper level disturbance picks up with it, so a few more snow showers around through midday or so on Sunday. After that, it settles down. We are looking at a moderate snow event here, several inches of snow. I'll show you the latest map, guys, in a second, and then we will talk about the next storm, which will show up about Tuesday night of next week.
Okay. Well, you know, with that snow and ice, walking around gets a little bit more difficult. And for those living with a disability, it's even more treacherous.
Yeah, we spoke to one man who's trying to spur change in his community to make getting around a little easier.
It's a simple act many of us do every day, something we take for granted.
Everybody needs their world to be accessible to them.
Walking is no longer an option for Mike Conkright.
Literally got crushed in the car, so I've been in a wheelchair ever since.
A car crash in 1991 paralyzed Mike from the waist down. Now, he's learned a new way of life.
It's funny, because if you don't laugh at it, then you're gonna cry. And I don't have time for that.
Getting around downtown Portland's historic streets, bumpy brick and cobblestone, is not always easy.
Some people call this the Congo. That's what they call Congo Street, because it's hazardous. You're taking your life in your own hands when you cross the street. That cobblestone curb cut caught my chair, and I literally slid out of my chair. It's like going cross country in a 4-wheel drive through the woods. Literally, it feels like that.
Mike challenged Mayor Ethan Strimling to feel it for himself.
It teaches you when you're actually in a wheelchair the difference between what a smooth sidewalk might look like and what it really is when you need it to be flat. That lesson has given me the insight I need to continue the work to try to make sure that our city is as accessible as possible.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, more than 11% of people in Maine under the age of 65 lived with a disability in 2016.
I don't resent anybody. I don't hate anybody. I try and educate. There we go.
So Mike shared his perspective and spare wheelchair in a trip over some of those difficult to navigate spots.
That's horrible.
You know, these are streets
that everybody should be able to go down, and not that many people can. There's solutions out there that we don't realize. Somebody's carrying around a solution, but if you don't stop and talk to them, you're not going to find that out.
The Americans with Disabilities Act requires a number of regulations on state and local infrastructure that was built after January 26, 1992. However, state and local governments are not always required to modify construction built before that time. Mayor Strimling says he's talking with the city manager about securing funds to update many of the walkways across Maine's largest city.
yeah, they could use some updates, I think, in areas for sure.
And a lot of people love those cobblestone streets visually, but you know, obviously, when you're not on 2 feet, or if you need some assistance getting around with crutches or a cane or something like that, or if you're blind, that can be really difficult to navigate.
I think it's even difficult to navigate sometimes with 2 feet. So
fair enough.
All right, you may have seen a story floating online today about sexually deviant behavior in the Westbrook Library. The story circulating claims that the Walker Memorial Library in Westbrook is installing new security cameras because of a rampant problem.
Several news outlets posted the story, including us on our website, but it appears the story might not be completely true. Christina Rex is here to explain.
Yeah, Chris and Amanda, I actually spoke with the Westbrook City Administrator today, and he says in his 15 years, he can only remember 3 inappropriate sexual acts in the library. But that is not at all the reason for these new security cameras. Jerry Bryant says he believes a reporter may have misinterpreted a conversation with Westbrook's police chief. He believes that the chief may have confirmed that there have been inappropriate sexual acts in the library, and that the topic then became the point of the story. It was then picked up by the Associated Press and distributed amongst several news outlets. Bryant says that while there have been a few incidents like this, it's not a widespread issue. Truthfully, he says, the library has had analog cameras and is about 10 years late for an upgrade to digital. He says the report has stirred up unfounded worry.
We're not complaining, we're not criticizing, we're not whining. It's not inaccurate, but it certainly placed an emphasis that was totally inappropriate. Okay, and I think we're harmed for it. That damages the image of the Walker Memorial Library unnecessarily. Okay, and it also creates a concern in the community that has no basis.
Bryant says a news organization has actually filed a freedom of access request, and he expects to report the exact number of incidents of this nature on Monday. Also in the news today, guys, students at St. Joseph's College in Standish actually staged a sit-in on campus to protest recent layoffs at the school. A spokesperson for the college confirmed to News Center around 20 staff members had their positions eliminated. None of those laid off were teachers. Some students blamed the layoffs on the cost of installing a new field turf, but the spokesperson says the turf had nothing to do with the reductions. Oh, that is definitely not the right video. The president of St. Joe's, Dr. Jim Dlugos, released the following statement regarding today's sit-in. He said, "We're proud of our students and their compassion for other members of our community. We are proud that our students are voicing their concerns and standing behind their convictions." Now, the college president also released a statement to both students and parents earlier this week about what he calls the school's need to move forward with a smarter financial plan, you guys.
Yeah, all right, thanks, Christina.
Mainers are bracing for winter weather, but California is facing the opposite problem. Wildfires, many trying to escape the flames, are navigating right into the fire. We'll tell you what's going on after the break.
Coming up tonight on 207, Maine now has nearly 100 craft breweries, but this one's different. It was created for and by veterans. We'll take you inside Stars and Stripes Brewing. And music from Jenny Lynn tonight on 207.
Hey guys, I'm Katie Ortiz for Social Stop. Being at the mercy of the popular navigation app Waze is proving to be a bit dangerous in Southern California. Users of the GPS system are reporting it's directing them straight into the streets and neighborhoods where those wildfires are forcing closures and evacuations. Now, police in Los Angeles are warning residents to avoid using navigation apps and to just follow their directions, according to the LA Times. Now, Waze is more of a social GPS app that heavily relies on information from the drivers who use it. People can report where there are cars pulled over, hazards on the roads, flooding, even where cops are. Now, the convenience of the Google-owned app is that it notices where there's traffic on your route, so it'll take you through the streets less traveled by. Well, for a USA Today reporter who was assigned to cover the wildfires in LA, it took him toward the flames. He says Waze suggested the back streets of Bel Air, not knowing there was a cop blocking the gates to the neighborhood because the road led, quote, to the belly of the Skirball fire. Now, Wednesday morning, there was no indication on the Waze app that any streets on the suggested route would be in fire territory. That didn't change on Thursday either, end quote. But he wasn't alone. This user tweeted at Waze asking to update the maps to get rerouted. Andy Ruther says he doesn't trust it. Quote, "It just told me I could save 8 minutes by driving right through a wildfire off the 405 freeway." Now, this user claims it's not just Waze, but also Google Maps and Apple Maps. They all seem to think I can take the 405 to work and drive right through the fire without any problems. That's a problem, she says. Now, a Waze spokesperson told USA Today that on any given day, those inflamed neighborhoods would have been shown as off limits within an hour or two, and that they worked very hard Wednesday afternoon to get the maps up to date and accurate. Now, it's not clear if the fires were moving too fast or for the app to be updated or whatever, but Waze is insisting they're working around the clock with local officials. On Wednesday morning, they urged residents to use Waze to find safety from the fires, saying they marked closures and shelters. Now, today, they say Waze and the LA Department of Transportation continue to work hard to keep the map updated in the wake of the wildfires, currently at 443 road closures and 22 marked shelters, and more added every minute. Now, Chris and Amanda, on any given day in LA, even if the conditions are perfect, there's going to be traffic. So this sounds just like a nightmare, with all of these wildfires coming at them in every which way and not knowing where to go.
And it sounds like there's no perfect solution for that. I mean, even with a GPS app, you know, that can try to tell you, alert you to those things. Yeah,
I'm wondering what Waze will be doing in terms of, you know, the learning curve after this, if they'll make any updates for any other natural disasters coming their way.
Lots to learn out of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Katie. Back here in Maine, the number of children identified as having been poisoned by lead has increased 10 times due to Maine's new lead exposure standards. The Portland Press-Herald reports that a new law that changed standards for lead poisoning has identified 386 children as having been poisoned by lead. The law has been in effect for a year. The law lowers the lead poisoning threshold to start intervention methods from 15 micrograms of lead per deciliter to 5 micrograms. The standard is now aligned with U.S. Centers for Disease Control recommendations. Once lead levels are discovered, the state takes remediation efforts to remove lead hazards such as lead paint from the home. Republican Senator Amy Volk said more has to be done to protect children and help families detect lead issues.
A rare late-season toxic algae bloom has prompted the state of Maine to close some of the most productive clamming areas. The closure stretches from Portland Harbor to the west side of Harpswell and affects hundreds of acres of clam flats in Freeport and Brunswick, as well as mussel and oyster farms in those communities and around Chebeague Island. Maine Department of Marine Resources spokesman Jeff Nichols told Maine Public Radio that this is just a precautionary closure. He says levels of the toxins were just shy of the threshold for a mandatory closure. He says the state decided to impose restrictions to avoid possible recalls if the toxin level continues to rise. When we come back, Tennyson Coleman gives us some tips on how to be ready for the impending snow.
Snow, snow, snow. Keith Carson has the full forecast when News Center Now continues. Winter is right around the corner, and for many of us here in Maine, we could see our first major snowfall this weekend.
News Center's Tennyson Coleman has a few safety tips as you prepare for winter sports like snowmobiling.
This weekend, you could see snow falling in your neighborhood for the first time since we said goodbye to summer. And as anyone who sells snowmobiles will tell you, it's the winter weather that drives business. This weekend's forecast calls for snow, and in Maine, snow calls for winter sports.
Snow really gets everywhere.
Lou Fraser is a manager at Friend & Friend, an ATV dealer in Orono. This time of year is usually when people come into the store asking about snowmobiles.
Usually it takes the promise of snow to get them going, to really get them going. You know, some of the diehards were in 2 months ago.
But before you pull out the sled, skis, or skates this weekend, there are a few things game wardens want you to be mindful of.
People that like to go out on the ice to ice fish or snowmobile or whatever it might be need to be particularly careful this time of year, of course. That the ice will not likely be thick enough where you're going to, to recreate on.
Corporal John McDonald with the Maine Warden Service says at this point, ponds and lakes may not be frozen enough to use for leisure.
Check the ice for its thickness. That means an ice chisel and starting from the edge, obviously.
McDonald says about 2 inches of ice need to form before people can skate on it. You need about 5 to 6 inches of ice to hold a snowmobile. As Mainers brace for winter,
having snow makes a big difference.
And the fun that comes along with it. Tennyson Coleman, News Center.
While Mainers are preparing for the same old snowy weather, folks in southeast Texas are losing their minds. For the first time in years, Texans woke up this morning to a blanket of the white stuff covering the ground.
The National Weather Service reports it snowed from San Antonio into East Texas. Most schools throughout the region delayed their start time. Some even canceled classes altogether. Many colleges also delayed classes for a few hours. Students were very excited to get this rare snowfall. It would seem a lot of them made the best of it.
It's amazing. It's my second time seeing snow. The first time was like 2009. I only got like maybe a quarter of an inch, so this is amazing for me.
For sure want to build a snowman. I'll definitely put a bougie jacket on it so that it looks really cute. Maybe put some ice on its wrist, on its little sticks that hang out. Make it kind of like me with my bougie jacket.
Well, according to the National Weather Service, San Antonio has not seen snow like this since January of 1987. Houston's last storm, though, dates back to 2004.
They get a lot.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare in San Antonio. There are parts of Texas that do get snow every year, but not quite that far south.
It's funny. So I used to work at a station in Central Texas about 2 years ago.
Before we claimed you.
That's right. And so I still follow a lot of my friends down there on Instagram, and they're showing all these videos of like their kids out there making snowmen. And for us, we're like, oh boy, yeah, snow. And for them, like, snow, oh my gosh,
hey, some Mainers are still like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh sure.
Some, but you're right. I mean, it's the novelty of it, right?
Right.
I'm doing weather, right? Okay, no, I don't know.
Well, we were talking about snow.
Oh, right, yeah.
Natural follow,
all right? Well,
there's
it's snowing right now in the south as well, southeast, not just Texas. And I can guarantee you this is a bad time right now going down in Atlanta. Over 700 flights already canceled from Atlanta's airport alone. We'll see this storm system arrive tomorrow afternoon. So tonight is fine. The first half of tomorrow is fine as well. The snow starts coming in somewhere around 1 or 2 in the afternoon and then intensifying late afternoon, early evening. The heaviest snow for a lot of us around dinner time, and you can see the rain snow line will be flirting with down East Maine, so they'll see a little mixing ongoing there. Snow continues on Saturday evening, temperatures right around freezing, and then early Sunday it's still snowing before clearing out around noon or so on Sunday. It should be a lot lighter, though, snowfall rates on Sunday. Here's what we have for a map. The adjustments that you'll notice are that we've gone up an inch here on the range, so 3 to 6 instead of 3 to 5, and we've dragged that line a little bit back more into the mountains, feeling like their topography there will help them make up the lack of moisture. So 3 to 6 there, and then 6 to 8 has been slightly dragged to the south and to the west of Bangor. Otherwise, though, and this is how we like to be able to do it, not any huge changes here, lesser amounts over down East Maine with that mixing. After that, there is another storm to watch on Tuesday and into Wednesday. As I've mentioned before, this is a bigger storm. Its setup is more dynamic in nature, but because of that, it's going to be a little bit harder to forecast, and that will include the possibility of some larger mixing zones along the coastline on Tuesday into Wednesday. We can't really mess with this storm too much until we get through this first one, and then we'll think about the forecast for this a little bit more in detail probably on Sunday afternoon. We'll have a map out for that. After both of these storms, it gets very cold late next week. Look at these low temperatures on Thursday morning, below 0 in many spots, even the immediate coastline 5 or 6 degrees or lower. It's worth noting, guys, sometimes a place like Portland goes the entire winter without getting to 0. Yeah. So to be at 4 or 5 in December, it's record-breaking for sure. Wow. It will be bitterly cold there, some snow showers on Friday. But again, I put this in the moderate category for a storm. I think it's definitely plowable. It's decent. I don't see it getting out of hand as far as snowfall amounts, and then we'll watch what happens on Tuesday. Again, we'll nail that down. It's a bit more dynamic in its forecast.
Okay.
3 to 6 for most of the state sounds like an enjoyable
pretty
amount.
Broad brush, yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
We can handle that one. All right, thanks a lot,
I'm going on
Keith.
vacation at just the right time.
Pat Callahan has a preview of what's coming up at 5:30. Hey, Pat.
Hey, Amanda and Chris, we've got a lot to tell you about in the next half hour. State police are searching an abandoned mill in Parsonsfield near the spot where a 13-year-old girl says a man tried to abduct her on Tuesday. And for the first time in more than 3 decades, the State House complex in Augusta is getting some new buildings. Those stories, plus a look at the new Amazon device that lets people get into your house when you're not there to deliver packages. Is it a good idea? It's all coming up on News Center at 5:30.
All right, thanks, Pat.
When we come back, Keith Carson has your brain drops right here on News Center Now.
All right, this one's a little bit in the weeds, but that's the purpose of Braindrops, I believe.
Yes.
You know, everybody's familiar at this point with the computer models, right? The European, the GFS, and this is something we talk about on a daily basis. But what people might not be familiar with is how we try to figure out how certain those models might be. And so what you're looking at here are a bunch of iterations of the European model called ensembles. They run 51 different ensemble members on every time they run the Euro. And what they're trying to do here, guys, is say, okay, what if this little thing about the atmosphere is wrong when we initialize? What will that mean down the road? Right? Compounding errors. That's how forecasting has trouble long range. So it takes little things and says, okay, maybe it's 3 degrees warmer at the surface than we thought it was. Maybe this trough is deeper than we thought it was. And it runs that model 51 times, and it gives you an idea of what the possible solutions can be. Let's advance to the next graphic. So what that will ultimately look like is a certainty map like this. Each one of these little lows is what one of the ensemble members thinks that storm will be for tomorrow. And you'll notice in this case, these are pretty well clustered together, right? Because we're close to the storm. So this, to me, says there's good certainty this storm tomorrow will be in this position at this time, which helps me decide how certain I am about the storm. Now, if we advance this forward and show you Tuesday's storm, it's a little hard to make out because of the resolution. This is a low here, that's a low there, that's a low here. So now there's a wider spread. And from experience, I can tell you this is a bunch of snow, this is a bunch of rain, right? So that's why I said we have to nail down the details as we get closer. So we use this tool, ensemble tool, to give us an idea of how certain we can be about the storm, and then try to convey that to people.
This is like darts on a dartboard, kind of like.
And you want to see them in the same spot with some certainty.
So how certain are you?
About this weekend?
About this weekend.
Very. And then it's less certain. And typically these things go with the time span. By the way, this is what we're thinking for this weekend. Speaking of which, now of course those low positions are only half the equation, right? The other part of the equation is what is the temperature at the surface? What's your snowfall ratio? These are things we take into account. I mean, Todd and I, true story, had a 15 to 20-minute phone conversation this afternoon about whether to go 4 to 6 or 3 to 6.
Really?
You know, just trying to get it as right as we can, recognizing at the end of the day, Mother Nature gets to decide. But this is the bullseye area we have up towards Bangor of 6 to 8 inches of snow. So that's what we're looking at, guys. Those are all the tools we use. And if we're still wrong, we tried.
It's like a magician giving away his tricks here.
You've got a lot going on there, So thanks so much for joining us on News Center Now.